99, 100.
Fair Janet was the daughter of a lowland earl who lived in a tall castle by a great forest. This forest had the tallest trees and the greenest grass, and in the middle of the forest there was a clearing, and in the middle of the clearing was a well, and around the well grew the most beautiful primroses and bluebells he'd have ever seen. However, not many people had seen these flowers, for it was known that the forest was guarded by the fairy folk, and if you disturbed the peace of the flowers, they would come and they would demand from you a ransom. From some, they would take gold or silver. From others, they would take your clothes, and if you were a maid, they would take your maidenhood. Janet lived in the castle, and she cared little for these stories. So one day, when she was tired of spending hours sewing or playing long games of chess with the ladies of the house, she set off by herself towards those leafy woods. As she got to that clearing in the middle of the woods, she could see all of those beautiful flowers, and one of them stood out to her, and it was as if it was calling to her. She leant over and picked it, and immediately a man appeared in front of her. "Why thou pickst the rose, Janet, and why thou pluckest the wand, and why have you visited Cowterhog withouten my command?" "I meant no harm," she said, and he looked at her deeply. "I have been sent to punish those who disturb the peace." He then reached over and plucked a white rose that grew next to her red one. "But I would disturb the peace myself for one so beautiful as yourself." And he gave her the rose. "Oh, who are you, soft-spoken one?" "My name is Tamlin." Then they locked eyes and embraced, and he took her down to the flowers, and she did not resist. Months passed, and Janet realized she was with child. She told the news to her father, who demanded the name of the fair knight so that he could give them a proper wedding. She refused to give it, saying that she was to blame for the child she carried. But she knew what she needed to do. She went back into that forest, and she found the well, and she plucked another rose, and Tamlin appeared in front of her. She explained that her father knew that she was with child, and that she needed to find the knight. "You are the fair knight." "I may have laid with you, Janet, but I am not a fair knight. I was once a mortal like yourself. Many, many years ago, I was out riding in these forests with my grandfather. As we came by the flowers, I felt a sleep descend upon me. I fell from my horse, and when I woke in the land of the fairy folk." He paused, as he remembered that strange land and seeing it for the first time. "Ever since that moment, I have been bound by the spell of the Elfin Queen. By day I am sent here to guard these flowers, and by night I am returned to her company. I wish to break this bondage I find myself in." "How could we do that?" Tamlin, I'll help. There is a way. Tonight is All Hallows Eve, the only day of the year that the fairy folk walk the earth. He explained what Janet needed to do, and she listened intently to his every word. When he had finished, he disappeared back into the flowers, and she returned home. She did not tell her father what had happened and what she had planned, but waited. When midnight came, she left the castle and went past the forest to where a river had a bridge that went over it. And near to the bridge she found herself a bush, and she hid herself behind a bush and waited. It wasn't long until the soft clattering of hooves came, and from the distance over the bridge came a handful of black horses. The fairy folk were here, but as she looked, she did not see the sign that she needed to look for. She let them pass. Moments went by until the noise came again, and there came a galleon of brown steeds. But as she looked, Tamlin was not amongst them. She waited again and again, wondering if it was all for nothing, when the noise came louder still. Perump, 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 and 24 of the white steeds came over the bridge, and at the very front of it, a knight with a black glove, and beside him, the elfin queen. She acted quickly. She ran towards him, grabbed him, and pulled him from his horse, holding him tightly. The elfin queen caused the other horses to stop, and she turned and looked at where Tamlin had fallen. She clicked her fingers, and Tamlin was now a bear. Janet held on to the bear as he tried to bite at her. The elfin queen clicked her fingers again, and Tamlin became an eagle, trying to fly away from Janet, but she held on to him as tight as she could. Again, she was a snake. Tamlin became a snake, and slithering and spitting at Janet, but she held on to his scaly skin, a block of ice. It burnt poor Janet's hands so much and caused them to blister. Tears formed in her eyes, but she held on as he became a burning branch. And as the fire lit, she took the branch and threw it into the river, and Tamlin returned again to mortal form. The spell was broken. Janet walked over to his naked body and placed a cloak around him to keep him warm. The elfin queen came off her horse and walked towards the two of them, lamenting, "Had I known this mortal would have fallen in love with you, I would have taken your heart of flesh and replaced it with a heart of stone. Had I known fair Janet would come to Cowterhog, I would have taken your eyes and placed them into the trees to watch over this wood." And then she turned and went back to her horse, and Janet held tight to Tamlin as the fairy folk galloped away into the distance.